I was prescribed Seroquel for possible bipolar and was also prescribed Prozac for my depression. I was displeased with what I was given since I strongly believe I have ADD type 6 Ring of Fire. So I took 100 milligrams of Seroquel at night and it made me extremely tired and I screamed if anyone got in my way of the bed. I was supposed to take 100 milligrams every night for possible bipolar. As far as recreational use of drugs come, I'm fairly experienced, I would say. I have tried alcohol about 10 times, cannabis about 30 times, codeine twice, poppy seed tea twice, methylphenidate 12 to 24 times, DXM once, benzos 10 to 15 times, and several other weaker pharmaceuticals. The day I decided to take such a large dose of Seroquel, it wasn't even a planned decision. I have a history of impulsively taking drugs to end my soberness when I'm feeling bad or just plain want to end soberness. I had an argument with someone and was pissed and depressed and decided to down 10 100 milligram pills at about 3:30 a.m. one morning. 4 a.m. I was still online talking to people, still no effect. 5 a.m. No real effect, maybe a slight marijuana buzz. When I looked around at a rapid pace, my vision smudged and dragged behind a little bit, but nothing serious. 5:20 a.m. I leave a note near my bed saying what I took and how much of what I took, in case something bad happened. Note was to parents if they found me having a seizure or something, and I try to sleep. 5:21 a.m. Every couple of seconds, I have a very alarming experience. I have my eyes closed and I'm trying to sleep, but I see myself awake somewhere else and I go to do something. Then my arm moves, moving my actual arm, forcing me to wake up. This happened several times until the scariest one happened. 5:25 a.m. I see myself in my kitchen, standing on a bowl, balancing. Then I lose my balance and fall on the table, and I jerk myself awake, scared shitless almost. 5:30 a.m. I decide I can't take it anymore, and I wake up my parents. They are asking me shit like, "Why would you do that?" and "What's wrong with you?" And all I would do is scream because I felt totally disconnected and on the edge of passing out. My mom called poison control for advice, and we were told to go to the hospital. 6 a.m. We arrive at the hospital. While in the car, I kept passing out, and my mom kept shaking me awake. My heart was also pounding really fast. I am put into a hospital bed and hooked up to an IV and vital signs machine. I remember little for the next 12 hours. Apparently my blood pressure went to a disturbingly low 63/30 and stayed there for several hours, and a doctor asked me if it was a suicide attempt, and I just casually answered that it was a recreational attempt, but I have no recollection of this. Also, nurses kept trying to pry my eyes open for me to look at them, but it was so damn hard to keep them open, and overall the nurses irritated me. I didn't lose it though. Everyone is lucky I didn't lose it. 1 p.m. I am transferred to a different hospital where I am to stay the night. I remember the whole ride and all, but I went to sleep again as I got to my hospital room. The rest of the time at the hospital was long and shitty. The vital signs machine alarm would go off whenever my pulse went below 50, causing me to wake up and get no sleep since my natural resting pulse is between 45 and 65. I was in the hospital for 30 hours, and now my relationship with my parents is lower than it already was, which I didn't think was possible. In conclusion, I was dysphoric at 100 milligrams, let alone 1,000 milligrams, and I don't think there's a recreational use for this drug. Before I begin to recall one particular Saturday, it should be noted that for the past 3 days leading up to it, I'd been taking daily 25 milligram doses of Seroquel. I'd been severely depressed for 3 weeks and was finding a vice in this medication, given to me by my friend who has prescribed it. Not only had it been providing me with some of the most restful, peaceful sleep I had ever gotten, but it had been nullifying my recently chaotic emotions, leaving me neither exceptionally happy nor especially sad. On this night, I'd learned that I had seriously underestimated the psychoactive effects of this drug, which is prescribed as treatment for schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. I was fully aware of this fact, but I somehow tucked it away as an afterthought. I also convinced myself it was safe because of a sneaking secret suspicion that I may have bipolar disorder myself. There is a history of it in the family, and I've had incidents resembling manic episodes, but I have had no such disorder diagnosed and certainly no prescription. Saturday around 4:30 p.m., I took my 25mg tablet after feeling a twinge of unease and desiring a distraction. An hour later, I'm over at my friend's house shooting the shit and playing video games when the Seroquel kicks in. It's a soft, calm feeling that stays in the back of my head, not the foreground. A party is supposed to happen, but our friend who deals and sells to us is absent. So after a phone call from my other friend Eli inviting me for a hash session and offering to sell me a 20-sack, I decided to dip, weighing whether or not to return to the party later. I would not. I drove out to pick up Eli and we met up with another friend, Ash. It's about 8:40 or so when we're all set to smoke. We set up in the shower room of Ash's apartment complex, intending to go for a soak in the jacuzzi afterward. It's necessary for us to hide out in someplace concealed due to the butane torch used to heat the pin on Ash's pipe. I packed my regular glass pipe and smoked that with Ash, while Eli took the first hash hit. He started to cough uncontrollably and left the rest of the smoke in the pipe with some hash still left. I quickly took it from his hand and finished the hit. I soon felt very high. Ash's pipe has yielded the highest results in potency out of all the smoking devices I have used. It's given me swirling visuals in the past, and in Eli's room where I had taken LSD before brought back acid flashbacks. It was a familiar sensation and disorientation. I began to cough as well, feeling pressure in my chest and lungs. Eli and I took Ash's advice and caught our breath with some deep breathing exercises. Now it was time for my own hit. We load up the needle, torch the pin until it's red hot, and I take my hit slowly and efficiently. I fill my lungs and have to exhale to take the second half of the hit. My cough gets much worse instantly. Ash and Eli had coughed till they puked off the hash pipe before, so I decided to go outside and get some fresh air. I dry heaved for several minutes, but never actually vomited. Feeling healthy enough, but incredibly high, I went back to the shower room. At this point, it was a few minutes after 9, and this is where things first began to feel off. Like the altered perception of an LSD onset, no one thing had discernibly changed, but there was a subconsciously tactile feeling lingering in the back of my mind that something was different. The shower room had become stuffy with our breath and smoke, and I felt more nauseous being in the room. I told Ash and Eli that I'm going to the jacuzzi to have a cigarette and exited the shower room again. You know that feeling of having a song stuck in your head? Well, as I walked towards the gate for the pool area, I could just hear a song like it was in the back of my mind, only it was a song I had never heard before. It was muffled, indecipherable, vaguely electronic, but mostly sounded like a continuous tone that changed pitch. I was very high and chalked it up to hash. I reached the jacuzzi and sat down in one of the pool chairs. There was one man in his mid to late 20s soaking in the tub. I offered him a cigarette and pulled out one for myself. He accepted and we started talking. Two things happened here. First, I told him that I had been smoking with my friends, where they were and what they had, without even intending to. It's like the words were just pouring out of my mouth without permission. Luckily, this man was also a stoner and I hadn't just busted my friends. Second, the music I'd been hearing amplified. I can tell now it was music with an irregular beat and strange sampling. It still only sounded like a tone from a synthesizer perhaps. I looked around the bushes in case it was coming from a nearby car. Unable to find the source of the music, I took off my shirt and moved to sit in the jacuzzi. As soon as I am submerged up to my collarbone, only my head and my hand holding the cigarette exposed, the music amplifies much louder. Loud enough to be playing off a speaker somewhere right by my head. The synthesized tones became high-tension strings and I heard robotic beeps and boops. The idea suddenly sunk in that the music might be in my head. I scrambled and searched my mind for any reason why this would be happening. This wasn't an acid flashback. I had never experienced anything like this before. Then I realized I had been taking an unprescribed psychoactive pharmaceutical for 4 days now, medication for serious mental illnesses. The moment I consider that fact, evil laughter interrupts the song. A deep demonic chuckle exactly like you would hear in Halloween specials were reverberating around the walls of the jacuzzi. The song changed back to offbeat electronic music. I started to think of the old lady who loses her mind on uppers and downers in Requiem for a Dream and how maybe I've really pushed myself over the deep end this time. Maybe this music will never go away, and I've done irreversible damage to my psyche. At this point, I began to have intense visuals as well. The fences and bushes were dancing and swaying, almost looming over me. The illuminated water, white foam and bubbles from the jacuzzi are exceptionally bright. I look at my damp arm and see long faces without eyes, noses, or any defined features in the water on my skin. Over the music, I start to hear voices talking to each other. The voices are human and loud, as though they were yelling some distance to one another. I couldn't understand them, though they were speaking what sounded like English. All of this leaves me extremely frightened, but I remained calm and didn't express any of this to the man sitting with me. I made small talk with him about the security guard walking around instead, not really paying attention to our conversation. As far as I could tell, my behavior was not irregular, though in retrospect I probably looked suspicious as my eyes were darting about, inspecting everything. After a few minutes, when my cigarette is about finished, I tell the man I'm going back to the room. As I exit the jacuzzi, the music returns to its initial inconsistent tone, though the volume of it is still up. I grab my shirt and towel, part ways with the other man, and head back to the shower room. I feel very disoriented and uncoordinated as I walk. I knocked on the door and announced immediately that I was in a bad place. I sat down and explained what just happened. All the while I saw shapes all over the walls moving upwards. It looked like a swarm of tiny creatures burrowed under the wall were all escaping out the ceiling. The music was still playing. I finished my monologue and Eli paused before speaking. He turned to me and said, "Maybe you just need to look at it a different way. You've been taking drugs and you're having a reaction due to the combination of them. Once they're out of your system, it'll stop. Just ride it out. Try to treat it like just another trip." This turned out to be exactly what I needed to hear. Hearing those words and repeated mantras of, "It's going to go away, this too shall pass," got me to seriously calm down. The music and visuals persisted, but I took less notice of them. After sitting and continuing to talk for about 10 minutes, that random guy from the jacuzzi came and joined us. We properly introduced ourselves, and the man locked the door behind him and sat down. Ash sparked up the fresh blunt he just rolled, and feeling calmer now, I decided I would smoke it. The music and visuals subsided and were replaced with a sleepy, familiar indica high. It was about 11 o'clock when we moved from there to my car, and while I would have refused to drive earlier, I was good and buzzed now and felt confident in my driving capabilities. The only remaining feeling unique to the Seroquel was the ultra-perception sensation I'd felt right before the music started. This was not something that was impairing my cognitive or motor abilities, so I felt safe to drive. We cruised over to AM/PM to buy energy drinks and snacks. The outgoing and 420 friendly cashier came out while we were smoking cigarettes by the car and told us to sneak around back. This turned into a very unexpected hash session in the back bathroom of AM/PM while the employee was cleaning up. I took another hash hit against my better judgment. Luckily, it seemed the Seroquel had indeed passed, as no music or visuals returned. Ash parted ways from us, and we left the extremely stoned employee to what I'm sure was an enjoyable graveyard shift. Eli and I have a joyful ride home, blasting dubstep music the entire ride. Nothing out of the ordinary, just a typical hash high. I dropped him off, returned home, and passed out on my bed. The next day was groggy, and I felt emotionally cold. I went about my quiet Sunday doing homework without a hitch. Ultimately, I don't see any way Seroquel could be used as a recreational drug. It seemed like a possible solution to me as a depressed and desperate but not diagnosed psychologically ill person. Quetiapine may be an answer for some, but not for me. I am not crazy. I don't need medication to not be crazy, and I don't need to become crazy. I was prescribed this drug by a psychiatrist to help me sleep. I had been up for 3 days and was sleeping an average of 12 hours a week. Being bipolar can be messed up, I guess. So I get the drug from the pharmacy, and I'm actually pretty excited at the prospect of getting some sleep. I looked the drug up on the internet, and while I don't see anything too positive written about it, I see nothing negative enough to deter me from taking it. Worst case scenario, I figured I might spend the night throwing up. It wouldn't be the first time a pill with a nausea warning has made me throw up. I was so fucking wrong. I had one of the worst nights of my life because of this pill. I took one pill as prescribed. I sat on the couch with my partner, and about an hour later, I felt very dizzy, like I had been drinking. I tried playing some video games, but honestly couldn't even focus, and at about an hour and 20 minutes after having taken the pill, I decided to go to bed. This is when things got really bad. At first, it started with my feet feeling warm. My feet felt hot and uncomfortable. I felt really restless, which was frustrating because I also felt really groggy and just wanted to sleep. For some reason, my nose became really stuffy, and I remember having to breathe through my mouth. Then I started panicking. I started literally having a heavy panic attack, which has never happened to me. I have anxiety issues, sure. I'm bipolar, it comes with a disorder, but I literally freaked the fuck out. I stumbled out of bed and I can barely balance. I just want to note that balancing was very hard through the whole night, and there were times I lost balance and fell. I go to my partner and tell her that I can't handle this feeling and I'm freaking out. She asks if I'm panicking, and I'm pretty sure I screamed yes. She gets me an ice cube and has me squeeze it, which weirdly helped. She has a panic disorder, so she knows some tricks to help it, I guess. I calm down, but I realize I'm starting to hallucinate. I'm seeing animals like penguins and dogs jump out of nowhere. I panic even more and start pacing. My partner asks if I'm okay. I scream no. She hugs me and makes a comment about how my heart is beating so heavy she can feel it just from hugging me. I panic more. I spend the night getting in and out of bed while freaking out. My heart is pounding like a drum non-stop. I'm dodging hallucinated animal entities, telling myself it's okay. That giant white dog that just jumped out at me from nowhere is only a sock on the floor. I keep going to the freezer to grab random ice cubes while I pace around my apartment trying to calm down. I asked my partner to, at one point, call the emergency room. They told us they couldn't really do anything to help me besides give me an IV, so we decided to let me ride it out at home. It was awful. The next day, I could barely function. If I had to work, I would have had to have my partner call off for me because I could barely speak. I slept the whole day until 7 p.m. that night. I only got up because I forced myself. I've spent the whole night awake, which is quite shitty, but at least it allowed me to write this. This pill is some serious business. I don't even know why anyone would want to take this, unless they needed it for a serious medical condition. Now, I want to start by saying I am a former addict and have been addicted to drugs for over a year now. I've used and abused drugs such as 2CB and LSD, etc., and had some scary experiences on them and somewhat pleasant. Still a benzo addict, I can assure you that aside from my Xanax withdrawals, nothing came close to my Seroquel experience. Around this time, I was heavily using Xanax and found myself running out of it so many times. I was going to my solo rehab meeting and had been talking to my key worker about being prescribed a benzo drug. There goes my drug addict ways. However, she told me she can't do that but can prescribe me something else that may help, Seroquel. Being the addict that I am, I gladly accepted and rushed home to read up on the pills before taking them, as she and a doctor who was there didn't quite explain to me the full effects from it, just saying it could help with anxiety. After searching up on Google, I found out that the pills were antipsychotics. Not going to lie, I suffer from psychosis, but still felt a way about taking a drug such as this. I also saw effects of it causing sedation. After seeing these, I began taking it. At first, it seemed alright. It wasn't really taking away my anxiety or anything, but I felt fairly sedated, and I love being sedated, so I continued taking the pills. I ended up running out of the pills and having a seizure from the last dose I took before going to college. My brother, who was there at the time, along with my college friends, called the ambulance. I ended up surviving and not remembering a thing and was taken to the hospital where they examined me and discharged me and my brother who was with me. It was only a day or two after that I went into withdrawals. It started off by making me feel weird. I started getting brain zaps and generally feeling my brain was being slapped around in my head. I was so scared at this point, and yet things started getting worse. I began feeling that my body was not of my own and had to keep checking in the mirror that I was myself, as I did not feel like me. Days passed and it kept getting worse. When I would sit down, I'd feel my legs were disconnected from my upper parts and seemed like I could move my upper chest out of place from my legs. I remember my headspace being totally hectic, and walking, talking, and doing my regular routines were altered. It was like I was high or something, but I wasn't, and I don't mean in a good way. Every time I'd get up from my couch to go talk to my mom, my house felt like it wasn't my own, nor did my family feel like they were my family. I felt so weird and scared, I can't explain it. I also remember having a hypomanic episode and feeling so stimulated I could barely sit. Each time I tried to relax, my head felt like it wasn't mine and was floating and not on my body. I know it doesn't make sense, but it's what I felt. I remember having vivid dreams too, really repetitive and so HD looking. Every nightmare I'd have, it'll end with me being beaten up by a group of boys. Weird. Even when I was using the drug, I remember moments where I had a conversation with my mom and later asked her did she remember me coming up to talk to her, and she said no. I was super confused. What felt worse was just the feeling it gave you. You didn't feel like you. It was like I was someone else in my own body going through psychosis. I can't explain it, man. I have more stories like my Xanax withdrawals, but even so, I'm still not off of the Xanax. Just that alone was enough to let me know not to mess with Seroquel or any other antipsychotic. I know it's because of the withdrawals, but still, I'm scared to even touch it. If you ever come across Seroquel and you want to try it and start using recreationally, please don't. It's not worth it. You will be frightened like how I was. Stay away from Seroquel with all of your life.